right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me and welcome to the September 2024 Move to France Q&A. My name is Allison Grant Lounes. I am the owner of the relocation agency Your Transformation. We help people to get the right visa and do all of the French admin to create their sustainable dream life in France. And I'm also the author of the book Foolproof French Visas. We are going to be celebrating the 5th birthday of Foolproof French Visas at the end of this month. And we're going to be announcing the release date for the next edition. It will be the 5th edition, the 2024-2025 edition. We will start announcing those release dates shortly. And I'm also the admin of the Americans in France Facebook group, where we have about 20,000 members who are either living in France or planning to move to France and getting questions answered about their relocation. In some of my other roles, I'm on the board of ARROW, the Association of American Residents Overseas. I am a citizen liaison volunteer for the embassy, so that basically means I get to ask them questions and tell you where to go to get information from the US consulate if you need services as an American citizen living in France. And what else? I am a member of various organizations in Paris and in France generally. I've been living in France since 2009, and I just celebrated my 15th France anniversary. In terms of upcoming events, so today is the first Q&A of the season. So we do them typically on the first Monday of every month at this time, 7 p.m. France time on Zoom. There are a couple in the upcoming year where the first Monday of the month is a holiday. So we'll be doing them on the second Monday. Last Monday was the first day of school. I wanted to be home for when my son got home from school, which is why we're starting this week. Upcoming, we have a couple of events and webinars that are going to be interesting to you. We're going to do a webinar with Bright Tax on Wednesday, the 18th. We're going to be doing a webinar on working remotely in France. I'm going to be doing that one with Fabien Pellissier, who is the insurance agent behind Fab French Insurance. And we're going to go through all of the options for working remotely, what visa you need, what work setup you need if you are going to be living in France and working here. We also have a couple of other events coming up that are escaping me right now, but we're going to be doing a couple events every month this year. So those will be free webinars. Before we jump into the questions, I do want to talk about the services that we offer at Your Transformation. Our goal is to work with people who want to create a long-term life in France and who want support in assembling the building blocks of creating that dream life. So we really focus on guiding you through all of the administrative steps that need to be done during the first year so that renewals go smoothly, so that you are creating a life that is sustainable and durable in France, which typically means getting all the admin done, playing by the rules, and understanding how to not necessarily not have a foot in your home country, but how to manage setting up your life in France so that your new life is here. We offer some full service packages where we help with everything from the visa process to getting on the French healthcare system, setting up your business if you're self-employed, exchanging your driver's license, etc. And we offer tons of materials to support you in doing all of the admin things that we can't do for you. So for example, things like you're moving over with your pets. We can't take your pets to the vet for you, but we can tell you where to go and when you have to, and have checklists for when you have to go and what paperwork you need to bring so that your pets can make the transition to France with you as well. We have a couple of programs, Fast Track to France, which is our program about all of the admin prep you have to do before and during your move. And we have the Complete French Business Incubator, which is our program for understanding the 4 self-employment visa types and helping you to develop a successful visa application based on the visa type that best suits you. Both of those programs we just finished updating. Complete French Business Incubator is completely new for 2024, then updated with a lot of really useful material. So that is an overview of the types of things that we have to offer. This Q&A, completely free. We have people on here who are clients, people on here who might never become clients. All of that is totally fine. the purpose is to share correct and accurate information about different things that you should do during your move. And if you are considering working with us at some point, then it's a way for you to get to know me, the things that we offer, and our philosophy in how we approach French bureaucracy and establishing a relocation to France. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into the questions. As I said, I do have quite a lot of questions to get through today. I'm going to try to get through them all. And here we go. Okay, so we have Alicia. What type of visa would allow me to buy and live in a house with the intention of fixing it up and renting out rooms? I may also be working remotely for a US company. Okay, so this is actually two questions. The first question is, or three questions really. The first question is, there is no visa type required specifically to purchase property in France. You can purchase property as a foreigner without restriction. It does not have any bearing on your ability to get a visa. And you don't have to have a visa in order to buy. We have many clients who have purchased homes in France as secondary residence many years ago and who are only now making the transition to actually living in those homes full time. Now, the second part of the question is relating to renting out rooms. So there's going to be two major types of rental scenarios. One is if you have gîtes, which are separate properties from, or they don't have to be physically separate buildings, but they have to be closed and have a separate entrance. And then the other thing is a chambre d'hôte, which would be up to 5 rooms inside your home, which share a common area and share an entrance. So those are two different things. They have slightly different rules around them. And both of those things could typically be run under the auto entrepreneur category. The income level that you're looking at there is going to be 23,000 euros. So if you're under 23,000, it's going to be considered non-professional rental income, location meublée non professionnelle. You'll see that sometimes as LMNP. If you're over 23,000 euros, then it would qualify as a business activity, a professional activity. And in that case, you would need the visa application and the business visa to reflect operating this rental business. And typically with that type of situation, you want to add in other things. You can have something called a table d'hôte, which is people who are staying at the property are invited to share the same meal around one table. It's less restrictive than a restaurant, not as many regulations, but would enable you to offer this additional service. You can have things like bike rentals, kayak rentals, things like that, that would also add income to the business and put you up over that 23,000 euro threshold. Now, the third part of the question about working remotely for a US company is what we're going to cover in depth in our webinar, which is going to be next Monday, the 16th, with Fabien Pellissier from Fab French Insurance. And the short answer is that in order to do any type of work in France, it does not matter where your clients are or what bank account the income is going into. What matters is that you, as a resident of France, will be a French tax resident. And per the tax treaty between France and the US, or between France and any other country, pretty much, you will be paying social charges and income taxes on your income in France first. So what that means practically is if a company has you as an employee in France, they are obligated to follow French employment law, including all of those vacation days and holidays. They're obligated to have a French payslip for you. There are certain circumstances where for a very limited amount of time, they can continue to pay US Social Security and Medicare tax on you, but that is very time bound. And usually it means you're on a temporary contract. So in most cases, if you're not on that contract where they are sending you as an employee on a US contract to France, I suspect, by the way, that this is the type of contract that Emily in Paris was initially sent on, an intercompany transfer contract. If you're not on that type of contract, then you need a way to be registered in France and have your social taxes paid. So this can take a couple of forms. If your salary is high enough, it can be through a portage salarial. You can transition to a more contractor scenario. You can be self-employed as an auto entrepreneur, or set up your own company where you are invoicing your employer, but charging them as if they're a client. And that creates sort of a level of separation between you and the company. And then you would, of course, establish your own French accounting and pay your own social charges. So there's a couple of different options there, but it requires exploring your particular situation in depth a bit more. Okay, Kendall, applying for a student visa potentially. How do I find the number of hours of French language classes required for a specific consulate? I keep going around in circles on the Boston consulate's page and the education page. The number of hours required can change depending on the consulate. It shouldn't. All of the visa application processes are standardized across the world through all French consulates. Now, some countries are more accommodating than others because the US, for example, has a very good diplomatic relationship with France. A lot of French people want to come to the US. That is very different than, for example, name a country that may be a former colony of France where that particular country is not cooperative with repatriating its own nationals who have overstayed in France, where there are tense diplomatic relationships, where the immigration is very lopsided in the direction of going to France. Those are the factors that can impact the number of visas that the consulate is going to issue. It's going to impact the relationship between the two countries and how easily the consulate is going to award or not award particular visa types. For French language classes, it's very tricky to get a student visa if you're a beginner, but typically you're going to aim for programs that are a full academic year. So 9 months of classes, 20 hours per week, and that follow the school vacations. One of the challenges, for example, if you're starting in January, one of the challenges is that you don't want to have a 2-month summer break because then they think, well, we can go back to the US and apply for a visa again. So you really want to have the continuous academic year of classes in a FLE program. FLE is Français Langue Étrangère Qualité. And that's a quality label that is going to make it easier for the consulate to issue student visas. And of course, you have to go through the Campus France as an independent student. If I have a 1-year student visa to study French but don't earn a degree, do I still qualify for the Recherche d'emploi visa? No. What are my options for staying longer to find work in France? If you only do 1 year of language classes, then an employer sponsoring you is going to have to fulfill the same obligations as they would if they were sponsoring you from the US. Being in France on a student visa for a language program does not give you any advantage compared to being a student or a graduating student outside of France. The one thing that it can give you, obviously, is the ability to be on the ground and make connections and things like that. And it depends a little bit on your field whether or not that would be enough. But in order to qualify for the Recherche d'emploi création d'entreprise visa, you would have to do 2 years in a degree program. So either that means you enter an undergraduate program at L1. L1 is a licence, it's the equivalent of a BA in France. If you start a degree from scratch and do a 3-year undergraduate program, or if you do a 2-year master program, you would qualify. Otherwise, you would be able to renew your student visa continuing to do language classes multiple times. At some point, you do have to switch if you eventually want to establish residency, because being on a student visa does not enable you to go directly into a 10-year resident card. Okay, Silvana. We received your book in the mail. We're looking into applying for the talent passport, company creation, or the economic investment visa. While my husband gathers the necessary paperwork, can I travel with a long stay visa, enroll my child in school, then switch to the talent passport family visa once it's approved? We read that switching visas can be confusing, so we appreciate your guidance. I would say that you do not want to do things that way. You want to all apply together for the visas, and then you do need to pre-enroll your child in school before the visa application. That's something that we assist with in our VIP packages. But no, you don't want to apply for a visitor visa and try to switch halfway through, because it will take for freaking ever. And if you are going to anywhere in the Nice region, it will take twice as long as for freaking ever. I would like to enroll my child in public middle school. What are the steps? So for middle school, you have to contact the school directly And it depends a little bit on the region. So we had clients in Bordeaux and we had to contact the DSDN, which is more of a departmental service that assisted in testing and evaluating the student as a first arrival and then placing her in the appropriate school. For other cities, it works a bit differently. The same family actually moved to Nice after that, and they were able to contact the school in the neighborhood where they had their lease and were able to enroll directly with the school. So it depends a little bit on what the school situation is and where it's located. Obviously, if it's a private school, that's going to be very different from a public school. My advice would be you want to find an Airbnb or your temporary housing in the neighborhood where you plan to be living or around there. Enroll your student based on that address. And then when you arrive in France, you need to find your housing really quickly so that you can finalize your child's enrollment in school with your long-term address rather than your temporary address, especially if you cast the net a bit wider for your long-term lease. Kirsten, what type of visa would be best if I were to buy a property in France and hold yoga wellness retreats in the spring and summer and either lock and leave for the winter or rent out? So that would be, of course, running a business. So it depends a little bit on the amount of income you would potentially make from the retreat and how much you might expect to deduct in expenses. Obviously, the tricky thing about retreats is that there could potentially be a lot of deductible expenses there, in which case you're going to want to set up a company structure, which would also be better because it helps with limited liability and insurance and things like that. So in that case, you might want to apply for a passeport talent création d'entreprise, which does require either a master's degree or 5 years of professional experience. And it also requires making a 30,000 euro investment in the social capital of setting up that company. I would not recommend having the property be any part of that investment, but having the company be totally separate from the ownership of the property. We do have clients who are yoga teachers who did this with us, and we set up their yoga retreat business. It's somebody who had been hosting yoga retreats around the world for many years, and that was a client that we had a couple of years ago. What visa type is best for digital nomads? I will be attending your digital nomad seminar too. So there's no such thing as a digital nomad in France. There's no visa type specific for digital nomads, and I have strong feelings about the creation of one because I think that that's going to ultimately make it much harder for people who do legitimately want to install themselves in France to arrive as self-employed people and stay here long term. I also think that typically digital nomad visas, you're not establishing residence, you're not getting on the French healthcare system, you're not doing many of the things that get you set up for sustainable life in France, and they're usually limited in time. So I don't think digital nomad visa is a good solution for France. I don't think it's on the table for any political party. And so what I'm going to say is that, you know, if you're working in France and you're a resident of France, then you need to have a setup that enables you to work and pay social charges on your income in France. And typically that's either going to be your company has you as a salaried employee and they can use a sort of shell company to employ you in France, and there are ways to do that, or it's setting up some type of business and being self-employed in France. So that again, we would look at the type of activity, the type and amount of income, but especially if you're having retreats in France, like that activity is all happening on French soil. The service is being delivered physically in France. There is no way to get around French taxes on that. Rosie, we are wanting to retire to France in 2027. Pretty far off. Is it as difficult to retire there as some make it sound? No, especially not when you have people who are guiding you through the paperwork. I think the thing that people find the most difficult is that a lot of times they don't know what to do and they don't know what order to do things in. And that can make it really difficult to adjust. And you always sort of feel a little bit anxious that you're missing something or that you're not doing the right thing. There's also a lot of really bad and outdated advice on the internet from people who did the thing, you know, once 5 years ago and are continuing to tell the same story when things evolve all the time. I will not pretend to be able to predict what the situation will be like in 2027. That will be a new election year in France. Hopefully I will be able to vote in that election. but it's not difficult. It's just a lot of things. And so our goal is to make it easy to keep track of all of the things and to make sure that they're all done and in the right order. How difficult is it to find long-term rentals? Again, that really depends on the region. We have somebody that we work with to find long-term rentals for our clients. She makes it really easy, even in cities that are notoriously difficult, like Paris, Nice, and Montpellier. She's found wonderful places for our clients. The main thing that's difficult is that you do need to have both regular income and some savings so that a service like Garant Me will insure you for the landlord, and they will provide a guarantee, which is sort of like an insurance policy in case for whatever reason you can't pay your rent. So that reassures the landlords quite a bit. Amber, as a freelance travel consultant, part of my services include helping clients book their accommodations where I charge a service fee. For example, I charge a $200 fee on a hotel stay of $800 and then bill the total amount of $1,000 to my client. Do I declare the turnover as $200 or $1,000? If it's the latter, then I would be paying more taxes even though my services cost only $200. Okay, so auto entrepreneur is not a situation that you can be in that scenario. If you have $1,000 of income as an auto entrepreneur, you are paying $250 in taxes. I'm saying dollars, but this would obviously all be euros. And you are not allowed to deduct expenses. So in that scenario, as an auto entrepreneur, you would be out of pocket 50 euros, which is obviously not a great way to run a business. So you would need some kind of company structure for two reasons. One is obviously being able to deduct the expenses. And two, in order to reserve accommodations and things like transportation, this would actually qualify you as a tour company. In France, tour companies require a special type of insurance through an organization called Atout France. This is to guard against companies going bankrupt and leaving all of their clients in the lurch, because that unfortunately happened with a couple of big tour companies during COVID. And you have to be able to reimburse certain things if the service is not provided. In order to be a member of Atout France, you need to have a French entity with a capital of more than 8,000 euros, and you need to complete a special application. And only then are you able to provide these types of services in France. The other thing is there are really special rules for TVA. There's something called VAT on margin. I have a friend who has a tour company, and there was not enough wine the time we had lunch for her to explain it to me such that my brain could comprehend it. But basically, the way VAT is charged to tour companies is it's based on profit from that particular tour and not based on the total amount invoiced. I cannot elaborate on that right now because it's not a thing that I understand enough. I haven't had to do that type of accounting myself. So there are a couple of things that you would have to work really closely with an accountant on to provide that type of service. So yeah, this is probably a talent passport application requiring a 30,000 euro investment and 5 years of professional experience or a master's degree. We would assist with getting all of the approvals, and we can't do the application for the insurance for you, but we assist with putting together the business plan that would be required for that as well. If you get rejected, can you redo your application and apply again? Yes. Obviously, you need to understand why your visa application was rejected in the first place before submitting a new application. Nancy, best place and cost to have translations and apostilles done on birth certificates, driving records, marriage. Okay, so a couple of different things. One is that apostilles have to be done by usually the state government of where the document was issued. I just had to get a copy of my birth certificate from Massachusetts and get an apostille on that. That was at the City Hall of Boston, and then you walk down the hall to another office where it is the Secretary of the Commonwealth that fixes the apostille to the document. So it's actually, it looks really cool. It's a raised seal, and it has a ribbon that attaches the document being certified to the apostille, and it looks pretty neat, but hard to scan. So that would have to be done individually by each state. If you have to get a marriage certificate from New Mexico and a divorce certificate from New Jersey and a birth certificate from Ohio, then you would have to send them off, usually the Secretary of State for those particular states. That being said, usually you don't need an apostille if you're not getting married, applying for citizenship, things like that. I would just order certified copies of the documents now. Don't order anything for the driver's license exchange until you're ready to do that, because those documents have to be less than 3 months old at the time of submitting your driver's license. And then translations have to be done by certified translators in France. We have a list that we provide to our clients, and that's in our program materials. My recommendation would be gather a bunch of documents together, get it all done at the same time. Usually they give you a little bit of a discount for multiple documents, but count between 40 to 60 euros per page for a certified translation in France. Nancy, if I move using Airbnb but need to validate my visa online, will things get goofed up when I change my address to my long-term rental because of changing the address? I plan on obtaining a long-term rental before I apply for healthcare and doing the driver's license exchange, so hopefully by the 90-day mark. So I recommend not validating the visa until you have the long-term rental. Our recommendation is doing an Airbnb for 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes 6 to 8 weeks if it's a city like Montpellier or Paris or Nice, where the housing market is really tight and you're coming at the wrong time of year. 6 to 8 weeks, fine, but you need to find long-term address in there because you don't want to play around with address changes. And also for things like the healthcare application, you need to typically show utility bills with consumption for 90 days before applying. So a lot of times it's not good enough to show where you were staying. They also want to see that you were actually living there via proof with utility bills. Again, these are things that we handle in our VIP packages. Eric, question about VLSTS, presumably a visitor visa, expiring before receiving the first residence card. Vie privée familiale in Nice. Okay, so we're going into a lot of personal detail, which I really can't go into everybody's personal detail and dates during these sessions. But basically, it's a visa that is about to expire. The renewal has been submitted, so that shouldn't be an issue. Typically, there are 2 documents that are issued as the application is reviewed. There's a prolongation, which is usually, we have not been able to look at your application yet. We know it's expiring. Here is a receipt that extends the validity of your visa. And then there's also the attestation de décision favorable, which is, we have reviewed your application and accepted it. Your visa is officially extended. We need to produce the card. We'll let you know when it's ready. Nothing bad will happen if you don't get the new card before the old card expires. That is extremely common. I recently had to renew my 10-year card and I am still waiting for any kind of notification. That's just how it goes. There is nothing to do except wait for the new card. Nobody is going to kick you out of France. It doesn't matter that your card is expired. My preference would be that you don't travel anywhere between the card's expiration date or the current visa's expiration date and having some kind of document that extends it. The reality is that if you're American or Canadian or British, they are not going to harass you at the border if you're only traveling on your passport when you should be having a card that's renewed. Carla, will you share some tips on securing a long-term rental? So that's going to depend on where you're located, but generally our 2 pieces of advice are: 1, you want to use a service like Garant Me so that you have a rent guarantee up to the amount that they think that you can afford. So it's basically a guarantee service where you're paying for an insurance policy. If for whatever reason you don't pay your rent, the landlord still gets paid. So that's the equivalent of having a guarantor who's French and a CDI, whatever. We recently discovered that Garant Me also has housing search services, but most of their stuff is located in Paris, and I know you're not in Paris. If you do end up getting certified with Garant Me, then you can ask them if they have anything available. They do have apartments that they have worked with, apparently. Does anyone have a tax person who can do our French taxes? US and French auto entrepreneur. Typically, French accountants are not going to do auto entrepreneur bookkeeping. That's a thing that you'll have to learn how to do yourself. It's something that we cover in the Complete French Business Incubator with videos on how to do your ongoing bookkeeping as auto entrepreneurs and how to do your income declarations every month. At the end of the year or in May for 2024, that income is just reported on your French personal tax return. I will give you the link for our referral form. So we work with multiple people who help with finding apartments, who can provide accounting services, who are translators, etc. So if you do need referrals to these other professionals, you can fill out the form that I just put in the chat and we will happily send you referrals. We do sometimes get commissions, but not from everybody. And we're recommending people that our clients use and have been happy with. Celeste, if I get married in France, do I have to go back to the United States to change my visa type, or can I do it from France? If you get married in France, like you arrive in France as a tourist, you marry someone while you're here, and you don't go anywhere, theoretically, you can stay in France for 6 months and begin the process to apply for your carte de séjour. I say theoretically because this is going to be a much longer, much more expensive, and much more annoying prospect than just going home and getting the visa in your home country. You can stay in France, and after 6 months, you need to have proof of residence. You need to have a French bank account, preferably with your spouse's name, like joint bank account. You need to have multiple bills in both of your names. You have to have multiple documents showing where you live and that you are indeed married to your spouse and residing in France and that you have not gone anywhere. And then theoretically, you can make an appointment and submit your application to the préfecture to eventually receive a titre de séjour as spouse of a French citizen. In actuality, it is very difficult. It is difficult to get an appointment. They have very few appointments. They want all kinds of documents. And during that whole time, you cannot work. And you have no papers, so you can't travel. You can't leave Schengen. My recommendation, regardless of whether you get married in France or outside of France, you get married in France, the advantage is you have a marriage certificate and you have a livret de famille relatively immediately. You can fly back to your home country, have your visa appointment the next day. Starting at this time of year, you can pretty much book visa appointments. It's not hard. You're not waiting weeks. And it'll take about a week to get your visa back, and you don't pay for your visa appointment. If you got married outside of France, you have to submit a bunch of documents to the French consulate in the jurisdiction where you got married, get a livret de famille, and have your marriage transcribed at the Service d'État Civil de Nantes. And at that point, you can go to the French consulate and request your visa. Then you return to France with a 1-year visa. You can work. You validate your visa online. You start establishing residency in terms of opening up a French bank account, especially a joint account, getting bills established in your name, things like that. And then at renewal, it's much easier to just renew the visa. And you don't have that long period where you can't travel and you can't work. Lori, my husband is a middle school music teacher, but is a musician first. I'm interested in learning about the talent passport visa. It seems like a great idea for artists. How hard is it for an American musician to find work in France? It really depends on your connections. We had some people during COVID who were jazz musicians. Unfortunately, they ended up not moving because of the COVID restrictions, but he especially was a jazz musician and composer originally from Brazil and had some contracts to perform and to record some like bossa nova and different jazz albums in Paris with people that he already knew from his different performances and whatnot around the world. I also, a couple years ago, had a client who was a violinist who ended up having a couple temporary contracts with some orchestras for rehearsals and performances and things like that. So in terms of getting the visa, like the profession artistique would be the correct type. The advantage is that you can have any type of work contract that you want. So you can have, it's called a CDDU, a contrat à durée déterminée d'usage. And that's something particular to the performing arts industry, where you have a contract for a certain number of hours of rehearsals and performances and things like that. And you can have a status called intermittent du spectacle, which is basically you perform for a certain number of hours at a certain rate, and then once you have worked a certain number of hours, you get an unemployment payment from France Travail, formerly Pôle emploi, formerly ACEDIC, which then compensates you if it's like August and there aren't any performances happening and you don't have any income that month. It will even out your income over time. You can also obviously do things like teaching in music schools, giving private lessons as auto entrepreneur, things like that. So my recommendation would be start making connections now in the music world of the area that you want to live in, and use those connections to explore the possibility of working together when the time comes. And again, this visa type is also covered in Complete French Business Incubator. We talk about the different combinations of documents and things that you can have and how to write a project plan for that. And it's also a visa type we assist with in our VIP concierge package for entrepreneurs and artists. Hello. In France, is it acceptable to work with more than one professional to find property? I've been sent several contracts and don't know the proper etiquette for finding the correct persons to work with. Do we go with a small regional group or an international group or both? So if you're talking about a property hunter, like a chasse immobilière, typically that's an exclusive contract because that person is going to go around and find properties in different agencies, and you're paying them a fee to find a property that meets your specifications. If you're talking about real estate agencies and you are going to the agencies and visiting properties, then that is going to be, it's wherever whatever agency has the contract on the property. So sometimes if a property owner has an exclusive contract with a particular agent, you'll have to go through them. And if a different agent brings you there, then there might be a split commission and cause problems. So it really depends on what type of professional you're working with. If I have not sold my residence, which will fund buying a home in France, can I secure a property for a period of time while selling or making my offer contingent upon selling? Yes, so this would be called a clause suspensive. What that means is that the seller has to agree, but normally for this type of thing they do. They have to agree that your purchase is contingent on the selling of your property. And you can put in other things as clause suspensive too, like it's contingent on getting a mortgage at a particular rate. It's contingent on the mairie saying that I can operate a gîte or a chambre d'hôte out of my property, things like that. So you put that in there, and then there's usually a time limit, like they give you 2 months from the signing. And if you haven't sold your property, then you have to provide evidence of that and also prove that you made an effort to sell your property, and then they can let you out of the sale. Zora. Is it more convenient or easier to manage and bring a PC laptop or a Mac laptop? I've been using Apple products, but I'm familiar with Microsoft. So I will tell you a story that I told my son the other day when we were talking about PCs and Macs. I moved to France to study abroad in 07, 08, and I had a brand new laptop. Let's say the computer was still less than a year old. I was in the middle of writing my senior thesis and my computer stopped working. And I thought, well, HP is right on the end of Metro Line 12 in Ivry-sur-Seine. So obviously, like they have some kind of factory or like distribution center in France, like clearly they'll be able to fix it. No. The US warranty that covered the HP required that I ship it to Texas. So I had to send it to my parents, who sent it to Texas. And meanwhile, I'm in France trying to write my undergraduate senior thesis with no laptop. And the study abroad program ended up having one that I could borrow, but not great to not have my own computer. And when I returned to the US, I bought my first MacBook and I have never looked back. Apple Care covers you worldwide. So I just always have Apple Care. I've had problems in France. I haven't even had that many problems with my computers. But when I have had issues, you can bring it to the Genius Bar anywhere in the world. They will cover the same repairs anywhere in the world. So that is why I am a Mac person for life. If you prefer PCs, then fine. Just be aware that you might not get the same level of warranty support if you bring a computer from the US. So I would recommend in that case buying something in France that is going to be covered with a warranty in France. Zora, does the rental agreement that needs to be taken to my visa appointment need to be translated? Is English accepted? Documents for the visa appointments are accepted in French, English, and apparently now Spanish. VFS agents may or may not actually understand anything in French. But for France, if you have an Airbnb reservation, it might be in English because that's what your settings on the site are. But your lease in France should be in French, and you should make sure that it is a legal French lease that meets the qualifications of a lease under French law, because there are a lot of people doing kind of sketchy leases for foreigners moving to France, and you want to make sure that you're not getting bamboozled in some kind of way. All right, I'm on page 4 of 7 of questions, but I'm going to continue until we've done them all. Connie, for scheduling my VFS appointment, I'll set up an Airbnb for accommodation. How does it work if I change where I plan to stay after I've submitted the Airbnb address? If you change the address where you're going to be staying upon arrival, you need to redo the visa forms. Your visa form that you submit to your appointment on paper has to match the reservation dates for the Airbnb and the appointments for your visa healthcare and all of that. So you need to redo the form and make sure everything lines up date-wise. Claudia, what is the process to enroll a 12-year-old kid in school? I think that we already covered that a little bit earlier, but basically a 12-year-old is probably going to be either sixième or cinquième, so middle school, collège, which means that you need to follow the procedure for that particular town or department. It depends on the region, but the enrollment is done through that school and not through the mairie. Mairie would be for children under 10 or 11, under elementary and maternelle age, but not for middle school. Is it mandatory to have French customers to apply for a profession libérale visa, or is it enough to have current US customers? The trend that we are seeing is that business plans are only being approved when there is some business tied to France. So that needs to be evident in your business plan, and we talk about how to show that in the Complete French Business Incubator. Mary, husband and I are in our early 70s. We are average Joes financially. We plan to purchase a house in France to facilitate travel throughout Europe. Initially, our plan is to travel on tourist visas and stay 90 days twice a year. Upon our death, will our children have to pay inheritance taxes in France? Very likely on the French part of your estate. That is more of a question for a notaire or a tax person. The thing that would be complicated is French property is very likely to fall under French rules, but that depends in part on whether France would consider you a resident. So it's really hard to say because it would depend on where you die as a resident, and I'm not really qualified to get into the nitty-gritty details of that. You would have to talk to an accountant. Can we put the deed of the house at the time of purchase in one or more grandchildren's name, and is there a legal age for owning a home in France? So another question I really can't answer. That would likely be considered a gift, but if you're not tax residents of France, then France doesn't care about your gifts. And you would have to look at the tax treaty to see that if you're a US resident gifting money to another US resident to buy a house in France, then that's not really much of France's concern. The thing that people do a lot is they create an SCI, which is a type of real estate company, and that enables the transferring of shares between family members a lot easier than, typical inheritance rules. And so if you set it up that way when you purchase it, it makes things a lot more straightforward. We can refer you to tax people who can help you to understand these questions a bit further and eventually help set up that structure when the time comes. All right, Alex. I graduated from Open University with an honors degree in math, engineering, et cetera, et cetera. Can we go over the procedure for getting your qualifications recognized in France? So there's a couple of things that you can do. First of all, depending on what you're looking to do in France, a lot of institutions and a lot of jobs and a lot of academic institutions might just recognize that degree for what it is, especially since up until 2020, UK universities were considered the equivalent of other European institutions. So that program might have enough name recognition if you were applying to jobs or university programs that you don't really need to do anything. One option would be you can go through the CIEP. There's an institute called ENIC NARIC, and I will type that in the chat because it's kind of a crazy name. And basically, depending on your qualification, certain qualifications you can send to them and have them validate it. And there's a fee for that service, and you have to get certain things translated. The other option too is If you are thinking about applying to French university programs, you can also have a university assess your degree, and it's something called validation des acquis et de l'expérience. Evaluate your degree and your professional experience to see what level you have based on their system, and then whether or not there's any continuing education to do to reach whatever degree level you would like to have in France. I'm French, my husband is American, and so is his mom. We plan to move to France in 2 to 5 years. Should he want to bring his mom with him, can he do it? Yeah, so you would have to sort of sponsor her as a dependent, especially since he's also not living in France yet. That would basically mean getting a visitor visa for her at the same time he gets his spouse visa. Not super complicated. We have clients that moved to France for a couple of years. Now they're in Mexico. He brought his mom, who was 93 at the time, and we helped with all the paperwork and we got her the health insurance and all of that. And they just had to show, they were taking care of her. They had a home where she could have lived, but they funded her care in a home because she needed more assistance than they could provide. So not a problem at all. Tanya, how can a single U.S. retiree sell a primary U.S. residence without incurring French capital gains tax or having to sell the home before obtaining a visa? Can this be done after obtaining a French visa or a carte de séjour longue durée? How much time is granted for selling the home? When does the clock start ticking? Okay, so there's a lot of questions here that are mostly tax questions, and we did address this in a previous webinar with Isaac Bashisha of Monceau CPA, who has been our accountant at Your Transformation, and who addressed this in a tax webinar we did in the spring. So I will summarize his answer, but I also advise you to go back on our website and sign up for the replay of that webinar for a little bit more clarification and to actually talk to a tax person. His explanation was that typically if the house is sold during the first year and you can prove that the process for selling the home began before you left France, typically France is not interested in the capital gains, or you can fairly easily get out of them. But once you are here for a bit of a longer time, you establish residence in France, you become a tax resident, your previous home no longer qualifies as your primary residence, and then you're going to have some concerns in both countries. I will say in the US, I believe that the qualification for a home being a primary residence is that you lived in it, I think, at least 2 out of the previous 5 years. For France, once you move out of a place, it is no longer your primary residence. And so that can complicate things immensely at the time of trying to sell a property if you move somewhere else first. Grace, after living in France on a long stay 1-year visa, I assume visitor visa, what are the requirements to register for your second 1-year long stay visa? Do those requirements change at all for your 3rd and 4th year? Until the 5th year and the opportunity becomes available to be a resident of France. Okay, so I want to address a couple of things here. So when you are on a visitor visa and you are renewing every year, there is no expectation that at some point you might get a longer term visa. A visitor visa is considered a temporary visa status. It is not a visa that leads to residency. And it is really anecdotal about whether or not people eventually get a multi-year card. We've noticed in particular that typically the people who will get a multi-year card or who will eventually get a 10-year resident card as visitors are people who have significant assets and Social Security income and who would never qualify for any type of French assistance. So in terms of renewing the visa, you want to make sure that you are on the French healthcare system, that you have opened a French bank account, that you are maintaining funds in the French bank account and have bank statements in French, in euros, that you are acting as though you are a resident of France, that you are staying the majority of your time in France, that you have things like a lease in your name and utility bills in your name and things that show that you are getting established in France. They have been a lot more demanding on the documents for renewals recently. I've noticed they're coming back with a lot of questions for people. You also want to be filing your French tax declarations because you're required to do so. Even if you're not going to owe French tax, you're required to file a French tax declaration as a resident of France, and it has to declare your worldwide income. So this is where people get caught if they're working remotely or have a business outside of France or whatever and are getting paid into foreign bank accounts. Your tax declaration requires that you to report that income, which means if you don't, you're at worst committing crimes, at best going to get in trouble with a capital T. And you also have to report your foreign bank accounts. If you're still operating as a resident of another country, they're not going to consider you a resident of France. Oh, Lauren says you're handsome.
Oh.
He is handsome. I made this one. I made this one. I think I did a good job. Okay, what are the financial requirements to receive a long stay 1-year visa as a single retired person? My Social Security income would be around $1,000 a month, and that's all the income I would have to claim. Are there benefits to becoming a retiree before proceeding to France? Are there programs to help low-income retirees? No. So when you are on a visitor visa, you are not entitled to any type of French assistance. The one sort of exception to that is if you don't have large amounts of passive income, then typically you're going to get on the French healthcare system at low or no cost, which is already a very significant financial advantage for Americans. In order to get and renew a visa, they're going to be looking for about 1,400 euros per month net. That is the net monthly SMIC. SMIC is the salaire minimum de croissance, which is the French minimum wage. So it goes up a little bit with inflation once or twice a year. Currently, gross minimum wage is 1,767 euros per month. That is the amount that you want to earn in a business. The net amount is about 1,400. 1,400 times 12, that comes out to 16,800 euros approximately. That's the amount in annual income. It could be some combination of cash savings and monthly pension payments. If you have a lump sum of money in your account from, for example, selling a property, that would work as well. Lauren, I arrived 10 days later than the estimated visa date due to a flight cancellation. Welcome to Po, Lauren. Our other clients also arrived in Po around the same time you did. And we had never had a client go to Po before, and we had 2 this summer. So hopefully you will meet up. I've been in France since September 2nd. Unclear what to do to continue with the visa. You have a profession artistique visa, so you are supposed to go online. There should be a video in Complete French Business Incubator that you have access to that will guide you through what to do now that you have arrived. Given that you're in the process of buying a property, I would register online with one temporary address and then switch your address once you move into your home. I wouldn't worry about switching with each address change, each temporary address change, but I think that it's going to be too tight. Alternatively, one thing you could do is you could wait until you have some kind of confirmation that the sale is going through and just register with the address of the home you purchased. Like sometimes if we know that people are moving in a month to a particular place, then we register them with their future address, even though technically we shouldn't. Technically we shouldn't, but it does save a lot of effort in terms of changing your address on everything. Is one able to use a check from the US to deposit in a French bank, or must it first be deposited through my US bank? Yeah, you'll want to deposit it in your US bank and transfer the money to France. One of the things that can be challenging about banking from the perspective of being an American in France is that it can be complicated to maintain a French bank account, and certain things like depositing checks can be difficult. I don't even know if French banks will take US checks anymore. They used to sometimes, but 1, the exchange rate is absolutely terrible, and 2, they would charge fees of 40 to 50 euros and hold your money for like 2 months because they had to make sure that the check totally cleared before they gave you the money. So don't try to do that. Deposit it in a US account. If you don't have easy access to a US bank account anymore, there are a couple of organizations where if you join, you can open up an account with the State Department Federal Credit Union. That's what I have as my US-based bank now. They will allow you as an American to have a foreign address, and I believe their app allows you to deposit checks. So if you're going to be here for the long term, the 2 organizations I know of off the top of my head that will qualify you for this is, 1, if you are a member of ACA, which is American Citizens Abroad. It's a lobbying group in Washington. The other one is any FAUCO group. So FAUCO is the Federation of American Women's Clubs Overseas. They are a UN organization that unites different American women's groups from different cities all around the world. I'm a member of AAWE, the Association of American Women in Europe, which is a group based in Paris. There's also the American Women's Group of Paris, the American Women's Group of Lyon, of Nouvelle-Aquitaine. I think there's a Bordeaux-based one as well. My colleague Kim, whom some of you know, is a member, former president, former all the positions of the American Women's Group of Languedoc-Roussillon. And yeah, so all of those groups would be members of FALCO and can get you
You can find them in a lot of places in France.
Exactly. Thank you for your assistance.
You're welcome.
Tamara, as a U.S. or single retired person, is 100% volunteer work in France okay? Yes. This is actually a really good point that I mentioned to one of our clients who came over with a business. She kind of wants to be retired, but she kind of wants to have something to do. And so she came with a profession libérale visa and she's been doing her thing and it's fine. But one of the things we were talking about, I was asking her, like, do you really want to continue doing this? Because you could also offer your services as a volunteer to a valuable organization and it gives you something to do. She actually makes things too. And I said, well, you could donate them and have them be sold to benefit any type of nonprofit group. So that's something to consider too. If you do have things that you make, but you don't want to go through all the trouble of getting an artisan visa or things like that, you could, like AAWE, the organization I just mentioned, we have a craft fair and Christmas market every year. Some people sell their own things, but there's also things that are sold on behalf of the organization and that benefit the group's activities and then other charitable organizations' activities. So that could be something too that you could keep in mind. Susan, if you apply with one French address and change your address and department in the 3 to 6 month interim, would this affect the visa process? Yes, once you validate your visa, you need to change the address online. I'm a little bit unclear from your question about whether you mean during the visa application process or whether you mean after you arrive in France and you move from a temporary address into a long-term address. So I'll answer for both. I think we've covered both already this evening, but you want to submit your visa form with the address where you will be staying upon arrival. You can submit your visa form to the visa office like 10 minutes before you walk up to your appointment. It does not have to be submitted a long time in advance. You just need to have the code that enables you to make the appointment. You can redo the form. If you make a mistake, if you finalize it, but you don't have all the information, you finalize it and then you change your reservation, whatever, not a big deal. You bring the most updated and correct version of the form to your visa appointment with the address where you'll be staying when you arrive in France. When you arrive in France, if you're staying at a temporary address, like an Airbnb, you usually want to wait to validate your visa or request your carte de séjour until after you have secured permanent long-term housing. By that, I mean a long-term legitimate lease where you will be residing and having bills in your name, where you will be able to receive mail, etc. One of the things I'm working on right now, I'm just going to interject this. I'm hoping to release it within the next month before an event that we have in Paris. I'm working on a survey to help you assess whether or not you've done all of the things that you need to do in your first year of living in France. So things like, do you have these bills, electricity, rent receipt, renter's insurance, cell phone, etc., internet? Do you have all those bills and are they in your name? And do they have, if you have a partner who lives in the same house with you, is your partner's name on all the bills as well? So questions like that, where we're trying to establish that you have done all of these things and that you have all of these documents that show residence. So that will be something that will be coming out shortly. And it's sort of like an audit of, have you done the essential tasks of establishing yourself in France? Connie, if I schedule the VFS appointment, then need to change it or cancel later and try again. Does that create any issues? Is this doable? So you can reschedule your visa appointment one time at no charge. If you reschedule it, then it won't let you reschedule a second time. You have to cancel. I'm unclear about whether or not they offer refunds in that situation. I have not seen one. So then you would have to pay the VFS fee again. And of course, it's dependent on availability. Oren in Saint-Tropez. If we sell our house in March 2025 and move in June, do we become tax residents? Okay, so you become a tax resident of France from the day that you move, and that is the date that becomes relevant when you are considering what income to report. So if, for example, you arrive in France with your long-term visa on, I'm going to take the example of Lauren, on September 2nd, 2024, when she does her French taxes in the spring, she will only report income from September 2nd, 2024. Anything that happened before that is irrelevant in France. Anything that happens over the course of the year is going to be prorated. So let's say, for example, you're getting Social Security and it's a monthly payment of the same amount. Let's just, for the sake of argument, say that it's $1,000 a month, taking the example from someone else. So if you're a resident of France for September, October, November, December, you would only report the 4,000 for 4 out of 12 months. And then next year you would report the full 12,000. And of course, with the understanding that you're reporting this income, but because it's a US source pension, that remains taxable in France. And so you would apply a French tax credit equivalent to what the French tax would have been, and you do not pay French tax on that particular amount. So if you have, for example, dividends, you would want to look at either when the dividends are distributed, or you would do like a prorated thing. My daughter and her husband hope to move to France from the US in 2025. She has dual citizenship and works remotely for a US company. Her husband is the owner CEO of a small web development company that only works with US clients. Can he simply apply for a carte de séjour as the husband of a French citizen, or will he need a special visa because he is a business owner? So great question. So the carte de séjour as the spouse of a French citizen is pretty much the most advantageous because it allows you to do any type of work. He doesn't need to apply for any other special type of visa. He could be auto entrepreneur, he could do apostilles salariales, he could register a company. All of the options are open to him. These options are covered in the remote work chapter of Foolproof French Visas. There are two different sort of sections or ways we cover that topic. There's the options if you don't need to be sponsored. So if you're an EU citizen, if you're the spouse of a French citizen, if you're the spouse of an EU citizen, if you're a long-term 10-year resident card holder in France, then your ability to work is not dependent on your visa. And then there's another set of options where if you need the visa based on your work, then here's different ways that you could do that. So he still needs to set up legitimately. She would also need to legitimately be a remote employee, able to like legally work from France and paying French taxes and whatnot. And he would have to have some way of his company being set up in France, or having a way to pay him legally in the French way. Okay, there's a couple of political questions here that I'm not going to cover because one, I'm not really qualified to answer them. Two, that isn't really the topic of the call. And three, we're already way over time and I still have a couple of questions to get through. Stephanie, how far in advance would you recommend meeting with you if I'm hoping to apply for master's program for next year? If you are applying for master's programs for fall 2025 and you want assistance with that, we already need to have a conversation because application deadlines are in January. I'm going to go ahead and put our link to schedule a consultation with me in the chat. But yeah, that's something you need to consider really soon. And if you're going to do a program that is partially or fully in French, you need to sign up for the DELF like yesterday. Any general advice on doing a master's with the intention of obtaining citizenship in the future? Get something that kind of leads to a job in an obvious way. You want to do something where it's not a saturated field, where you're going to have good opportunities to do an alternance or a good internship. We were actually just working today on the student visa section of Foolproof French Visas for the new edition and adding in some more detailed explanations of the application procedure, the Campus France procedure, and how master's programs are structured. I did my master's in France when I arrived 15 years ago. The Campus France fee now is more expensive than the amount I paid for a year of tuition and a year of student health insurance back in 2009, 2010. But that being said, still a really good deal and a really quality experience. Most master's programs now do have a 6-month internship requirement. That's not something that I had to do. I had to do a 100-page thesis, but my master's program was in comparative literature. I'm not sure that would obviously lead to any particular type of job, which, was why I wanted to pay 400 euros for it and not $45,000. But yeah, you want to be really clear on what the career options are going to be, and you want to do a full 2-year program that will qualify you to get a Recherche d'emploi création d'entreprise, so a program in French that will allow you to get a 1-year extension on your visa and then have that time to look for a job after you graduate. Robin, is there a language requirement for over age 70? So for citizenship now, if you are applying to be naturalized French, there is no age limit on the requirement to have what is now going to be a B2 level of French to request French citizenship. For the multi-year cards and the 10-year resident card, there are language requirements. The current exemption is over age 65. You do not have to show language skills. The general consensus is that that exemption will continue to apply. Richard, I am a FIRE, so I assume financial independence, retire early, US citizen, looking for retirement location in the EU. I'm also minority Asian. What is the tolerance for minorities in France outside of Paris? That's not really a question I can answer. It's really going to depend on where you go and what kind of community you can find. I think anywhere in any French city will be fine. In my observation as a white person who has never been mistaken for not French, it seems to me that nationality in many situations is much more of a factor in terms of having the benefits of being considered American. It's much more of a factor than race in some situations, but that's not a question that I can speak to. What is required to get full medical coverage for retiring in France? So you need to be living in France for more than 3 months. That starts the process for getting you on the French healthcare system. I will say that if you're significantly under retirement age and that you have stocks and dividends and capital gains and things like that, you'll want to make sure that they are in appropriate containers to fully benefit from the tax treaty. So you may want to talk to an accountant who specializes in the French-US tax treaty. Those are the people that we work with. So for example, you want to make sure that all of the funds that you're invested in are going to continue to be taxed in the US. You want to make sure that whatever amount of capital gains you might have is not going to push you over into paying for PUMA. PUMA is the 6.5% tax on passive income. So certain types of investment income, if you go over about 21,000 euros, you might be subject to PUMA tax. It doesn't apply to things like pensions and social security, etc. But if your income comes from regular investment accounts that are not things like 401ks and IRAs, then that could be a concern to you. So I would say talk to an accountant. Catherine, I'm considering a move to France in fall 2025. I know I can qualify for the current long-term tourist, I assume you mean visitor visa, as I have a US pension from a career in education. I currently do some consulting type work on the side. I don't know if I'll have work next year or not, but I'm concerned about getting bored if I stay in France longer than a year and may want to do some work. So if you want to do consulting, if you want to do any type of work, then that is likely going to be a profession libérale visa. If you want to move in September, that means that typically you need to start working with us by April, May at the latest, so that you can have your visa appointment over the summer. If I go to France for a 2-month stay in spring of 2025, does that have an impact on the time frame of a year-long visa that would begin in the fall? No. The 90 out of 180-day rule is totally separate from having a long stay visa and any time that you might spend in France on that. Candace, for a visa that allows me to continue working as a freelancer, is it possible to utilize income from several freelance sources, such as remote university teaching, mediation services, legal services, publishing royalties, and remote consultation work? These would all be paid in US dollars and bring in unpredictable amounts that fluctuate. Yeah, so all of those, any income that you have while you're a tax resident of France would be considered French income. So those different activities could all be added under your auto entrepreneur registration in France. However, mediation in France has a specific meaning. Companies like my own or like any business in France have to have a subscription to a mediation service, which is a company that will manage disputes brought by clients. That is the first step in any legal undertaking with a service provider in France. I, like any company, am required to have this mediation service. Things like mediation and remote legal services are going to fall under the categories of things that are regulated, and you have to be really careful about what it is that you're doing and what it is that you say that you're doing and whether or not you're actually allowed to do them. Anything that would be considered practicing law, you would not be licensed to do in France. Things like consulting, remote teaching, publishing royalties, freelance writing, whatever, we can kind of group those into something in a business plan and add the appropriate activities to your auto entrepreneur registration. But that kind of hodgepodge of things, you would want to be careful about how you put it all together in a business plan. All right, I've managed to get to the end of our questions. So finally. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to go ahead and give you again the link to schedule a consultation with me. An individual 1-hour consultation is a really good way to get all of your questions answered about moving to France, to come up with a timeline, etc. No matter whether you're planning on moving in 2 weeks and you've already done everything yourself and just have a couple last minute questions, or if you're planning on moving in a couple of years and you want to understand some things that you can do along the way to make the transition easier. As I mentioned, we do also have our 2 programs that have been just fully updated. We have Fast Track to France, which covers the 9 areas of transformation. So everything from immigration to housing to getting involved in your local community to finances, career, etc., and how to plan for an effective transition. We have the Complete French Business Incubator, which is our signature program that covers the 4 self-employment visa types and how to set up and run your business successfully in France. And of course, we have packages for working with us where we take care of all of the things that we can take care of, and we guide you through every step of your transformation. Our next Q&A is going to be on, I believe, Monday, October 7th. So I will see you then. In the meantime, we do have a couple of other events that I will mention again. They are all free, or most of them are free. We have our remote work webinar next Monday evening. I think it's an hour earlier with Fabien Pellissier of Fab French Insurance. We have our Bright Tax webinar with Melissa Groves, I believe, from Bright Tax, covering U.S. taxes for Americans living abroad. There's going to be another webinar that I'm doing the last week in September. And then there's also, if you're going to be in Paris or if you're in Paris already, there is Bloom Where You're Planted, which is sort of an orientation for living in France. That is at the American Church in Paris. It is an event that has been happening for more than 50 years, since back when you could not go on Zoom to find out all of this information, and you had to go do it live in person at the American Church. It is a lovely group of people who organize that event. I'm going to be there with Lacey, who is our admin and client care person on Team Transformation. And that event does have a ticket cost, but it includes a whole day of presentations and group sessions and things like that. I will be doing a presentation on the French healthcare system, and I believe it includes lunch as well. Thank you so much for coming to this very long first Q&A of the year.
Yeah.
Bright Tax is Wednesday the 18th. So if you're signed up for our newsletter, there'll be a sign up link in the newsletter. All right, so that covers everything, and I look forward to seeing you on one of our upcoming events.
Bye.
Have a good evening.
Bye.